Hey, hello, Lisa.
Hello, Nate. We're
Ready
off to
to
a good start.
what?
So we're off to a good
We're
start.
off to a great start. We're ready to jump in.
Yes,
Uh,
we are.
well, we're gonna pick up from where we left off last week. Last week the topic was how to stay focused through monotonous tasks, especially through the holidays, making sure we're delivering consistency, results. Always trying to strive to be challenged to figure out what we can be doing in the moment to continue to move ourselves or our businesses forward. And this week we wanted to parlay that into the topic of reflecting on your year, and kind of where that leads to goal setting, which we'll talk about in a separate topic. But ultimately, there's a huge part of reflecting, of remembering where you started in the beginning of the year. Did you achieve your goals? Really looking back to see what worked, what didn't work for you. So do you want to kick us off with a couple of thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I think this is timely, obviously, as we're rounding the corner to Thanksgiving, and then people are starting to think about, what's coming for the next year, whether that's preparing for goal setting, which we'll talk about in future conversations, or just, focusing on family through the holidays and kind of that fresh start with the new year. Um, and I think what's really important is to do the reflection now. So before you even turn the corner to goal setting or where you want to focus for the next year, thinking about and actually using the Habitual Growth app, I think that's really important. That's one of the reasons that we built it, is so that you have that concrete data in front of you. So not only focusing on how you feel about the year, what you feel like went well, where you feel like you maybe got drained a little bit, but then actually comparing that to the data in the app to give you that full, well-rounded picture of, okay, here's where I think I did things well, or, really want to focus potentially next year, and here's what it looked like this year.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know about you. I love the categorization component of the Habitual Growth app.
Yeah.
It helps me lessen burnout. I would say, just given my personality, it's always sort of there because I like to burn the candle at both ends. Um, but it also makes me mindful of where I'm spending my time and thinking about why. And so that's really where I start with the reflection is, do these categories represent where I wanted to essentially end the year? And then from there, is there anything that I might change from a categorical perspective? I don't know, what features or things do you use to get you started when you think about reflecting?
So I think it's a great plug. Yes, the habitual growth app is really important, and yes, you're correct. We started this because we wanted to bring a level of transparency behind what are you actually getting done and be real about the numbers. And at the end of the day, if you can't track things on a daily basis, then you're not managing them in the right way. And
Yep.
so, historically speaking, I was that person, right? I would write down a bunch of goals. I'd have these grandiose ideas. I think that I had a starting point and I'd be able to, develop the strategy throughout the year. But the reality is, like, if you don't have that reflection, if you don't have your starting point and really are aware of where you're at, it's hard to make true, realistic progress. And I think that's really important, is because, the term goal, I think, is spread around in a really lofty way. I've got these goals and these aspirations and I want to do this, but there isn't really a hard strategic roadmap of this is how I'm going to accomplish them. And for me, that starting point is, okay, well, what did I set out for at the beginning of the year? For 2024, what did I really set out to do? Did I accomplish it? Where did I go wrong if I didn't accomplish it? And I'm just going to tell you right now, because I've been thinking a lot about it there, I'm going to have to take a loss on a couple of different goals this year. And I don't want to say it's for lack of trying, but what I would say is I think being able to tie those individualistic, actions on a daily basis to those goals wasn't as tight as it probably could have been, right? There are things like revenue for the company, which I think is really
Mhm.
hard. There's,
Yeah.
on the personal endeavor side, are Bree and I going out to a date once a month because we want that personal time in our community. What
Mhm.
you really have to look at where you started from, what you accomplished, and then how you want to change that trajectory or move your goalposts into the next year.
Yeah, I want to pause on that because I think it's really important to not only look at the success component of it, how far did you come, how many goals did you achieve, but to your point, where are the ones that fell short? And I know for me, I have no problems setting goals around my professional life. It's where I like to pour my time and energy. And there are other aspects of my life that probably need more attention to goals. And I tend to not be as intentional in those areas because it's less comfortable. It's something that's maybe pushing me outside my comfort zone a little bit more than maybe some of the other areas. So I think being cognizant of that too. So not only where did I meet my goals, where did I fall short, but why? Was there something on the back end where maybe, I didn't put in the time because I wasn't passionate about it, because it really would have stretched me and it still felt uncomfortable. And thinking about what could be different next year, and even do any of the things that I set out to do this year roll over into next year. You may want a clean slate and say, you know what, I got it all wrong last year.
Mhm.
Let me start over. Or there may be threads that you pull forward into the next year. So I think just that recognition of why you built the goals you did, and then maybe why the actions didn't line up the way that you had hoped they would.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And one of the things that Brie and I do, which I really like, I started this about 2 years ago. Not all of this is in habitual growth. So we as a family have our own kind of goal setting. It's an Excel sheet, but it could be, any type of document. But basically, it does a couple of things. It's one, what's the values that we're holding? At the end of the day, what do all of these goals represent for us? What is that direction? Why are we going there? Is that still true today? Because to your point, right, most people will just take an old goal and they'll just roll it into the next year, and then they'll just make it bigger, right? I want another promotion for my job, or, my company did $1 million in sales, so I want to hit, 1.5 million. And there's not a lot of thought or molding of it. It's just a continuation of the same direction. And I think that can be really dangerous just because something you were working on previously may not matter anymore, right? And is
Mhm.
there time, is there thought that needs to go into saying, okay, how do I make this better? How do I deliver better results or more consistency? And then going back to that document that Brie and I have, there's things like what's serving me? Like, what are the behaviors that have served me really well over this last year? And then what are those behaviors that didn't serve me well that I need to abandon? Are there certain triggers that I have that I can really work on? So from a personal and honestly like mental capacity standpoint, when you use the term burnout, I always think of like, hey, that this is professional. There's just a lot of going on. We're just burning the candles at both ends. But at the end of the day, we at Habitual Growth really want to be able to drive people to develop their perseverance, their mental fortitude, and through that requires those challenges. And so I take a look at like, what behaviors am I doing? What did I give up that weren't serving me? What do I need to give up in the new year to make sure that I'm being more consistent about certain things?
Yeah. And I think in terms of behaviors, you know, our mission, is to really grow lives. So we are dedicated to giving back and to moving people forward, and being a part of someone's personal or professional development journey. And when I think about behaviors too, one of the things that I feel like people often leave out of their reflections and then we going into goal setting for the next year is, how am I giving back?
Mhm.
I think we focus a lot on what do I need to move forward, whether it's financial or certain milestones in a business. And I think we spend less time on the give back component of it.
Mhm.
And I just want to remind people that that's equally, if not more important, to be being intentional in that area as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes, that's a great call up, but I think it also goes into kind of the what works for me, right? That basic level of self-awareness and understanding of, hey, I really need 6 hours of sleep, 8 hours of sleep. If I deviate from that, I'm just screwed, right? And
Yeah.
so, maybe you need to go to bed at 10 p.m. every night. That's okay. It could be giving back. I thrive on working with other people, creating that value for them. That really helps me as well. So I think those elements are extremely important in some of this. And so I do agree. I think the give back piece of it is there. And then just tying this back to kind of the categories that we talked about, you brought up earlier in the conversation, that really works as well because those categories will tell you, hey, I'm operating at my best when these things are in my life, when I'm giving back, when I'm reading, when I'm working out every day, but only you know what that is. And that's why it
Mhm.
is so customizable because it's really helping you understand like, hey, I perform the best when these things happen. And it doesn't have to all be professional. Like I said, it could be sleep, it could be diet, it could be reading and mental, it could be community. You have to decide what those things are, but that reflection piece is really, really important now before you head into the new year and you sit down and you spend time assessing what your goals are going to be, what direction you want to head for this new year.
Yeah, and I think too, we focus on, you know, professional. I think that's a default for a lot of people. And then we focus on perfection. And so it could be, looking back over a year, how many days did I conquer, period? Or how many days did I do a behavior? And then setting goals to improve that. If you recognize that that is a behavior that you want to foster more consistency around, and that's completely okay. But I think, even to your point, some of those things are more important than setting, I'm going to make $3 million in sales goals, because you have to have the foundational aspects
Mhm.
to make you the most productive and creative as possible.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you bring that up because that was what I was thinking about last night. In the last, let's say probably November, I'm not as consistent in my conquering of the day as I was historically. And
Mhm.
I don't know why that is. I haven't been able to pinpoint if that's just too much going on, if that's the holidays approaching and personal time. I'm not really sure. But I know it's like at least one day a week now, I haven't been conquering the day. And that brought me to realize, hey, if I'm going to improve on what I did in 2024, just in terms of my level of integrity, right? If I'm writing something down and I'm saying, hey, this is what I'm committing to for this day, and I'm not delivering on that, even if it's one time a week, that is having implications into my mental self-belief, right? Like I'm not delivering on what I said I was going to. And so I'm going to be looking at those numbers this week and I'm going to be saying, okay, well, maybe I'm at 80% conquering the day, as an average for 2024. Well, how can I get that to 85% or 90%, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if I'll ever get to 100, but I want to get damn close. And so, just being able to have those numbers at your fingertips, be able to say, okay, this I know, like from an internal confidence, self-belief standpoint, I grew a tremendous amount because I was doing what I said. How do I carry that and amplify that message into the new year? This is where those data sets really become interesting. That's where they
Mhm.
become really important, is because now you have the true tangible data in front of you, and you can say, okay, well, now I need to be doing X every single month in order to achieve that. And you can really break down those behaviors.
Yeah, I think it's funny you talk about maybe not conquering the day, because I have found, I catch myself sometimes creating a list and putting things on it that I know I can do, instead of doing the things that I know I should.
Mhm.
And I think there's a flip side to that too, when you're looking at how many days you've conquered and what your essential actions are, and what percentage of your essential actions are tied to goals that you're working on. Is um, am I picking the easy actions because I just want to conquer the day, or am I picking the actions that are moving me forward to the greatest extent?
Mhm.
And that will be reflected a lot of times when you get to year end, in how close you got to your goals if you didn't achieve them. If you're way far behind, you're probably not doing the right things,
Mhm.
or doing them to the greatest intensity to move you forward.
Yeah. That's a great call out. And I think that happens to everybody. I don't think that's unique to you or me. I think that happens to a lot of people. But it's what do you do in that moment? Do you just say,
Mhm.
okay, I'm aware of this, right? I mean, the option is I'm not
Yeah.
aware of this because I'm not self-aware, right? Which you wouldn't
Yes.
know. If you were self-aware, you would understand this is what I'm doing. And then you have the option, hey, let's change this. Let's move over to now say, hey, I need to put more challenging things on here because I know I've got more in the tank. And that's a really important internal conversation. Again, that can be something that you're just aware of. You're reflecting on what worked for me over the year. And if you're making those micro changes along the way, because you have that mental fortitude to do that, you have the ability to say, okay, I'm aware of this. I'm going into correction mode right away. That helps serve you. If you don't have that, that could be something that you really want to work on. At the end of the day, this is why that consistency is really important, though. Having those numbers, having the categories, really writing things down on a daily basis, because without that, you don't really know if you're kind of mailing it in. It's just there's
No.
no gauge, there's no baseline for you. And so, hey, I may have done this really, I may have done a great job with these five things, but like maybe you could have done 10. but you don't really know until you start to challenge yourself every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe just to wrap this up and bring one more piece of tangible advice. As people are reflecting on their year and, where they landed with goals, where they landed with behaviors, what they might want to change, I usually suggest to people, one, write it down. So as things are coming to your mind, start to write it down and do it more than one sit down time point. So maybe go out for a walk and then come back and sit and write down. Maybe try it, after a few minutes of meditation and then write it down, and do that 2 or 3 times, because one, you'll find you get different pieces of information when you reflect, based on the activity or the things that you're doing. Some people generate more feedback for themselves if they're up and moving. Some people, it's if they quiet their mind. So try a couple different scenarios to see where you get the most beneficial information. And then once you've written everything down each time, look where some of the commonalities or similarities are, and start there when you really want to dig in and maybe start to fine tune for the next year coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Awesome. Well, always good catching up with you. I appreciate these insights, and hopefully we created some value for people.
You betcha. I will
All right.
see you next week. All
All
right.
right. See
Bye.
ya. Bye.